Hello, everybody, and welcome to another one of Icing on the Career Cake, the podcast from DCT Recruitment. And today, Diane and I are joined by Andrew from HR Toolbox. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, Graham. Hi, Diane. Nice to see you both.
Where are you coming from, first of all?
I'm coming at you from, where am I? I'm in central Manchester at our office on Key Street, which is just down from the Opera House in central Manchester.
Oh, fantastic. So tell us a little bit about you. How long have you been in HR?
Yeah, gosh, I've been in HR for over 20 years, actually. I worked in a HR call center type environment for a good long time, actually, and left there a couple of years ago. I was their head of advice and employment tribunal litigation, and then I set up HR Toolbox about 14 months ago now. Actually, we've been going.
Yeah. So this was a company that did call center operation, and you were HR within that organization. Is that right?
Yeah. So what you typically find in the HR market space is there are some, and quite a number of quite large HR call center providers. And I was working with one of those call center providers. And I set HR Toolbox up 14 months ago or so because I wanted to give the market something a bit different. So my analogy is the call center model is almost like they're all football teams, and they're wearing different shirts, right? So they're just basically playing the same game, but they're just wearing a different coloured football shirt. And HR Toolbox, we play lacrosse. So we play a totally different game with our one-to-one support model, which writes as much as we can for our customers. And yeah, we're all about helping our customers by saving them time, saving them money, saving them costs, saving them time, and helping them to grow. That's what we're all about.
Well, there you go. Did you know what? I know nothing about lacrosse really, other than it looks really hard.
You have a stick though, so you can hit people with that game. You're all right.
Well, yeah, you do a lot of that kind of flicking a ball and then catching it. Yeah, clever stuff.
It's a good game.
You've played it? You've actually played lacrosse?
No. So the reason I mentioned lacrosse is my wife used to play lacrosse for Wilmslow ladies, and she actually grew up in Surrey down south, and lacrosse is big down there, and she played at quite a high level down there. Actually, I think she got up to county level. Wow. And when I first met my now wife, she was playing lacrosse, and I used to, before we had kids, I used to go down on a Saturday afternoon and watch her play lacrosse. She was fantastic. She was like a box-to-box defender. She'd get forward and score. She was fantastic. So that's the lacrosse analogy, where that comes in.
Where it came from.
Yeah.
There you go. I'm
more of a netball girl myself.
Oh, the old netball. And she doesn't get lacrosse with you anymore?
she does get lacrosse with me from time to time.
Right. Oh, fantastic. So talk about the toolbox bit of it, in particular. What's in that toolbox then that companies can get hold of from yourself?
Yeah, so we work in three main different ways. So the first way is we help companies on an as and when basis, right? So they might need, they might be with another provider already and they want a second opinion on something, or they've just got a specific little piece of HR work that they need to have dealt with, and we can help customers on an ad hoc basis. And we also can help customers on a subscription basis. So our subscriptions are for 12 months at a time, and those subscriptions don't auto-renew. So what you typically find with the call center providers is you'll be signed into a multi-year agreement and then they'll auto-renew you. But we don't do that. We just do 12-month fixed-term contracts that don't auto-renew. And within that subscription service piece, we've got 2 levels of service. So the first one, the first level, is really focused on making sure that your business is compliant, right? So making sure you've got all the relevant contracts, all the relevant HR forms, you're following all the relevant HR processes with your team on what I would call positive and negative problems, right? So positive and negative things come up in the workplace all the time. Positive thing, somebody's just announced they're pregnant. It's really positive. But you're a business owner, you're really busy, you don't know the intricacies of the paternity regulations or indeed the process to follow. And that's where we lean in and help with that positive problem, if you will. And then we also help with more constructive, challenging problems like, perhaps colleagues aren't necessarily performing to the right level and need a bit of support and guidance on how to, improve and enhance that performance piece. So that's in that sort of HR compliance space. We do a lot of work there. So it's very much making sure you've got all the documents, all the processes and our guidance to make sure you're HR compliant. And then we also do, again, within that subscription piece, 12-month fixed term, no auto roll, we do an employee experience service, which includes all the compliance stuff that I've just talked about. And this is really actually looking at your end-to-end. So looking at your business today, what is your people plan from recruiting to onboarding to inducting to getting colleagues successfully through their probationary period to moving them into business as usual performance management cycles to identifying talent to all the way through to offboarding people, hearing the employee voice, all that really good stuff. To shift the dial actually on your employee experience, to help improve your employee experience, to help you create a world where you're better able to attract talent to your business, you're better able to develop people and talent within your business, and you're better able to retain that talent within your business. And there's all sorts of things we do in that employee experience subscription. It's a really creative space, very individual to each individual client, and all of that I've just talked about really is the toolbox, right? So there's little tools that you can pull out for each different thing that you might need, and it's not a one size fits all solution. We very much are about understanding the customer's need in a HR sense and delivering a solution for them that fits their needs.
I want to ask, because those are very different sides, right? And a lot of people that get into management probably sit in one side or another in terms of they're either a real process-driven person or maybe they're more of a person. Very rarely do you actually get somebody that's kind of a really good mixture of both. It is trying to bring people together in that middle bit. Is that the hardest bit of all?
That's really where our value is. It's about, for the people that are great with people but actually aren't following the process. So like, I guess in the context as an example of onboarding and inducting people within your business, you might have a fantastic people person, they really help, gain buy-in from colleagues, talk very eloquently and clearly about, the business's mission, what its values are, etc. But then it's all very inconsistent, right? So one person's onboarding and induction process is different to another's. One person turns up on day one and all the kit's laid out for them on the desk. Another person, it's all, lastminute.com, pulling it all together, or it's just not even there, right? So a lot of our job is about understanding what they've got. So have they got process people? Have they got, really sort of passionate, engaging people? And yeah, bringing those two elements together to get to all of that in one, right? So that everybody has the same experience. Because you know what? Ultimately, there is some risk if you're following different processes with people. If you are onboarding and inducting people in different ways, there naturally could be some risk that comes from that. One person has one process, another has another. Well, why is that? I didn't get that. Is that because of a protected characteristic type, approach? The question can come up. So, yeah, our job is a number of things, really. It's about helping the organization to shift that dial on the employee experience, and then through that, creating a world where their employees are happier. And ultimately, through that, mitigating risk.
Diane, do you see the same thing in sort of recruitment side of things for businesses as well, in terms of, is it different sometimes when you deal with management who are very process driven, as opposed to some where they're incredibly, I must find the right person. It's all about whether this person fits us and the culture, and
Yeah, definitely. Like you'd have some people who trust you and don't necessarily need to see CVs. There's certain jobs you don't really need to send CVs for. When you're filling trades or whatever, you don't really need to send a CV. But some site managers are a bit more thorough and might say, right, I want to see the CVs and stuff, whereas others wouldn't be bothered. It's just they just make sure they can do X, Y, and Z of whatever the job is that they need to do. So yeah, it can depend. And then some people need a selection of people so they can make an informed decision of who they want to hire, and don't just want to, interview that one person, where other people like, no, time's precious, so just send me the one or two people would be completely right. So it can all depend. You've just got to adapt to the way the client wants it. There's no right answer. It's how they are comfortable with the process and what they need to do. The problem you can have sometimes, though, is if you want to have too many people to see, you can lose the good people in the process, so it's finding a right balance between that, really, and people understanding that we have done our job thoroughly and we've listened and we've got them the right skill and the right culture of a person for them. So, to try and capitalise on that, if they feel that person's the right person when they interview them, and so on and so forth. Some people can lose candidates by just wanting to see a couple of more people, because it's a candidate-led market at the minute. So it can be a little bit tough at times.
So do you think, though, that maybe sometimes, especially when someone's worked for an organisation for a while, there's an element by which, and this is to both of you really, there's an element by which they potentially feel like it's kind of not on my shoulders to be responsible for this, whereas actually in this day and age we should all kind of be responsible for ourselves a little bit more. And it's actually, that's a really important point here. I mean, I take the CV thing, for example. You might have been in a role for 5-6 years or whatever. It may have been 5 or 6 years since you've done anything with your CV, but actually, should you not be keeping your CV up to date and actually making sure it's relevant still?
Yeah, and a lot of people don't do that, or they don't tailor their CV to the job role they want them to go to. That's the biggest thing I would say. Like, I was at a funeral, to be honest, my uncle's on Monday, and one of my cousins was saying, I'm not getting interviews, and she just wants a general admin role, but she's done very high-end jobs. And I was like, you need to probably dumb your CV down, right, wrong, or whatever, but people will look, and as much as you're saying you want to step down, you don't want that responsibility. That can scare some people, because although you don't want that, they might see that as a threat. So if you tailor your CV to the job that you're going to, you're more likely gonna get that. That's not to say to lie on it. Do you know what I mean? It's just bring to the attention your skill set of that jobs that you've done that marry the job that you're going for. You know, like what we do is we will speak to the candidates and get their experience, get a feel of who they are, get what like, and then we will put a summary at the top of the CV and say, you know, X person has got excellent CAD skills. You know, if it was something like that they need, they've got 5 years experience in this and they've worked on X, Y, and Z projects. You know, if that was something that the client was looking for, because they can become quite lengthy, you know. So if you sort of can summarize at the top what you can do, basically sort of sell yourself in for that job, then they'll read that and be like, oh yeah, you know what, they're of interest, and then they'll look further down the CV. And I think that's where a lot of people can go wrong, you know. It's not, don't use this, you know, the same CV for every role, because it's not always relevant.
No, that's true.
I think like when you think about it from, you know, the employer's side, the CV is essentially like, it's the shop window. You know, it's like, why am I gonna, you know, select you for an interview, you know, to go through, and, you know, we help clients with, you know, how to structure competency-based interviews and all that kind of really good stuff. But the CV for me is that it's almost like the advertising board to say, right, we've advertised this job. These are the key components of the role. This is who we are as an organization. This is our value proposition as a business. Give us, you know, as an individual, take responsibility and show us your shop front on why you think you're a great fit for not just the role, but the business as a whole.
Let's go impression into that business, isn't it? Your CV's your first impression. So, you know, having it like, I know this sounds thingy, but my dad told me this from like young. He was like, put everything justified. So it's like straight both sides. It's neat, it's clean, it's, you know, it's just little things like that. You know, is the grammar right? Have you spelled things right? Have you put bowls in the right place? It's just making it look smart, isn't it? You know, because we'll obviously take them and smarten them up and put our logo on and that. But if you're not going through an agency and you're trying to apply for jobs yourself, then you need to think about how have you represented your CV, because if it doesn't look the best and you're going for an administration role, for instance, then you're not probably going to get past the selection process, because you haven't showcased that your work's tidy and neat and stuff. So why would they put you in an administration role, for example? You know.
Yeah, I do think people miss the point sometimes. I mean, the probably one of the only actually CVs that I've actually ever sent was for a creative job really early on in my career, and I all I did was send a can of 4X with I give a 4X for this job. You know, because it was a creative job. I got the job. You know, I mean, that ultimately, if you sent a piece of paper, it'd be the same as everybody else's. That's not actually showing that you're creative, really, is it?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think sometimes
I think that's a really interesting point, Graham, because, like, you know, I've been that hiring manager. You know, I've been that hiring manager looking for technical roles. You know, I've hired HR qualified consultants. I've hired more legally focused colleagues. You know, and in both of those roles, as the hiring manager, I'm super clear on what, you know, the role requirements are. I'm super clear. I don't need to have it written in front of me. I'm super clear on what the organization's mission, vision, and values is. You know, I know what we're about as a business. And when I'm doing those CV reviews, and, you know, you might have, you know, 10, 20, 30 CVs to get through. The only question I'm asking is this person leaping off the page for me? And if the answer is no, I move on to the next CV, you know. It's what is that wow factor? What is the Castlemaine 4X? Other beers are available. Yeah. You know, what is that Castlemaine 4X? Is that leaping off the page for me? You know, that's what it is for me as a hiring manager, for sure.
Yeah, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you've got to then have the substance behind that.
Sure.
If you haven't got the qualifications, or you haven't got the experience, or you haven't got this or that or the other, then, you know. But that first bit, needs to show that, you know, that you understand the brief, if you like. Surely.
Yeah, exactly. That's what that summary's doing, is showcasing that you've read the job detail properly, and you're picking out your skills to match what's needed or required, or, you know, a certain qualification that can be hard to find. You know, if you put that at the top and said, right, I've got X, Y, and Z, and I've done this, or it could be, I've got X, but I'm willing to do the training to get Y. I've done it, I just haven't got the qualification. You know, there's just depends, doesn't it? But that's why you've got to have a bit of an in-depth conversation with someone. And going back to your point, people don't change CVs. So, like, I've had people say apply for a gardener role and they've done nothing to do with gardening on the CV. So you'll ring them like, so why have you applied? Don't get me wrong, some people just don't read job applications properly either. However, you'd be like, oh, well, yeah, I've done this, I've done that. And I'm like, your CV doesn't say that. I'm like, oh, yeah, I haven't updated it for 4 years. So, you know, where we're a bit different is you don't dismiss anybody's CV. You know, you do have to probably sift through and speak to people, you know, and that's where you can find the golden nugget as well. And then you've got to
rewrite. And come on, let's face it as well. If they're going for a gardening job and they don't use the word cultivating somewhere in the CV, then it's a fail, isn't it? Right? Yeah. It just has to be there, you know. They can make the language a bit more flowery. That's great.
But I think, like, we're joking, but not, like, when it comes to interview on, you know, like for a role like a gardener, like a lot of that role is focused on how, not just doing the gardening, you know, it's actually focused on how do you deal with the customers, you know. So, you know, you might, from a recruitment point of view, talk to a candidate about, right, scenario, we've got a client, customer, they've been with us for 10 years, and we've just dug up the wrong rose bed and they are not happy, right? How are you going to deal with it? What are you going to do? You know, give us an example when you've dealt with something similar. And it, you know, it's drawing out those examples that are relevant to your role, that, you know, thinking about the things that happen in the day-to-day role that are challenges, and positive and negative challenges that you actually want a certain type of response around. And it's trying to draw those out of the candidate to see whether they're a good fit for your organization. Yeah. And, you know, I hate to be that guy, right, but I am HR, and it's making sure that when you've got that structure and, you know, you're asking those sorts of questions, you've got a model answer. You know, you're clear on what your model answer looks like, and you're listening for, have they said this? Have they said that? Have they said the other? And it's 1 point for each potentially, right? So that at the end of it, you've got a structure. You've focused on skills, experience. You've got a scoring method to be able to sort of judge the candidate based on what they've told you, and then you're selecting purely on the basis of their experience and their skills and their qualifications, rather than anything else, which is really what the recruitment piece is all about for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I always ask, like, what are people's 5 key interview questions that they would ask? So if we do that before we send that person over and they can answer them to the, you know, a decent level, then we put them forward. If they can't, then there's no point, you know, and that's just purely and simply to make sure we put the right person in front of the client to save everybody's time. You know, why we do that. It's not like to over prepare the candidate. Does that make sense? And give them the answers. That's not what it's for, because they can change them questions if they want. You know, I'm not going to say in the group they can completely change that, but, you know, if there's certain elements of the job that they need to do, so it might be, you know, explain to me, you know, what's your plant knowledge, what type of plants are in season at this time. So if you were going to the garden, what plants would you be doing? What, you know, because that's important. So going back to your analogy, don't dig up the wrong rose bush, you know. So for instance, does that make sense? Or, you know, if it's a certain piece of software that they use, you know, explain to me how you use, you know, Zero or whatever, you know, just explain to me what's your knowledge around that? What is it that you do? Or how do you pay a CIS worker if it's a payroll job? You know, just asking them to explain parts of the job, because, you know, anyone can say they've been to the moon and back on the CV. You know, you can write whatever you want down, but you've got to question what that is. You know, I'm not going to say we'll know every single answer, but we'll certainly give it the best shot of, you can just tell, can't you, by asking someone if they know the answer or not. You can tell with the information and level of conversation of where it goes. So, you know, then, you know, who to put forward.
Yeah. I've got another question for Andrew, but before I ask that, I just want to ask you one quick question there, Diane. Can you ask as a candidate, can you ask too many questions in an interview? I've written you probably can, because I probably think that I'm completely unemployable by somebody. I have worked for other people in my life, but I didn't have interviews as such. I just was invited for a cup of tea, which is a completely different process. And normally when I have worked for other people, I was brought into the company to be disruptive within that company. So I asked a lot of questions, but in general, from someone that's not had that much experience of interviews, etc., generally, if you turn up, can you be asking too many questions?
Do you mean as the candidate asking the client questions?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's always a balance, and that I think works both ways, doesn't it? You know, neither person wants to feel grilled, do they? You know, so I think that's just about having a bit of emotional intelligence to the situation. You know, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to that, because it can depend. You know, if you're in front of someone who's very analytical, and needs to know all that information, then for them there probably isn't too many questions. So whereas if you're in front of someone who's very creative and flamboyant, they probably start to feel offensive if you were asking too many. So it's reading the room, isn't it? It's reading the type of person that you're in front of, and mirroring that, really. You know, it's trying to mirror the person slightly.
You say your product does this, but does it really?
Well, yeah.
Where's the data?
I think the most important thing is the candidate goes prepared about the business. You know, I would always tell them to look up the business, look about it, go with some challenging questions, because at the end of the day, whether that's comfortable or uncomfortable for whoever's interviewing them, if you've got some challenging questions, then you're going to bring something different to the party, aren't you? And that's what that's about, isn't it? Finding that person who can maybe turn the business upside down and make a difference and put it on a different trajectory, you know. So by having some challenging questions in your interview is not a negative thing, I don't think. And if it is, and that's the type of person you are, then that's not the company for you. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah,
that's a fair point.
It's really interesting. Like for me, like the interview, within that interview process, you're going to be selecting one or more people to join your business, right? So in an employee experience sense, this is like their first experience of the organization. You as the interviewer, or you might have a panel, as a management team, you're representing your company. So to Diane's point about, being the candidate being prepared, a lot of my job is talking to managers about you being prepared. Make sure you as the manager, the interviewing panel, have read those CVs, that you are authentically, through your interview process, showing an interest in the individual, because that is what this process is all about. You're getting to know each other, you're unpeeling layers, you're testing technical knowledge on the knowledge of a particular seed in season, if we're using the gardener example, right through to the technical knowledge, if you were talking about a lawyer, the technical experience of employment law, whatever it might be, but also you're wanting to understand what makes them tick, and are they a good fit for your team dynamic, right? Because you might have a team dynamic that's full of different personalities, and you're trying to figure out, is this a good personality fit for the team that I've got as well? Obviously making sure you're mindful of the relevant legislation that goes hand in hand with all that. But yeah, it's definitely important for both sides, I think, to be prepared.
It's also just something comes to mind there when you're saying that is something I used to teach back at McDonald's about teams is when anything changes within a team, you go back to something called forming. So your team's forming again. Then you'll always get to storming. So you will always have conflict. So going back to the right fit, everyone will have that conflict because they'll have different opinions, but you need to see whether, going to your point, Graham, you were brought in to shake things up. Is that what you need to make people think differently? Or do you need people to get on a bit quicker? So you don't need that. You need someone that can just slot into the team quite easily. Because then once you've gone past that, then that's when you get to norming. And then that's when you get to performing. So you also have to think as a company, and we've spoke about this on other podcasts, is your retention is just so key, because you keep having to bring someone into the team. You're always at that forming stage. So your business is never going to move forward. You're never going to get to performing, because as someone leaves and someone comes again, you're back to forming. Even if you don't replace it, people have to learn new roles that they're in. So keeping your team growing at a steady pace, not doing too much. Or you'd probably be better hiring 2 people in one go. If you know you need 2 people in the next 6 months, you'd probably be better hiring the second one fit earlier. So you go through that forming stage, and you get to, performing quicker. They're the dynamics of things that can impact people's businesses that they don't see. And then it can be, all reasons why, can be the agency didn't do their job right, or it didn't this or whatever. But, if the things within a business, the onboarding process, the training process, if all that's not in place, no matter how good or bad you are at the recruitment stage, nobody's going to stay. So you have to look in-house sometimes. They can be difficult conversations we have to have, is if we're having to keep sending people for the same role and they're not staying, and they've been involved in that decision process by interviewing them or doing a factory walk around or whatever it is, and they're not staying, then you sort of have to ask, well, what is your onboarding process? What is your training? We have to go to the candidates and sort of ask, well, what is happening? And you've got to quite diplomatically feed that back, because the issue can be in-house sometimes, not from our process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's perfect, actually, because that's where I was going to pick up on with Andrew again, because Andrew, you were talking about, or we were talking about getting the creative people together and the process people together, etc. And a lot of that happens at management kind of level. But how much do organisations sometimes struggle with? This is a management thing. We've got to get the culture right. We know we've got to get the culture right. We've got to be very clear about our purpose. We've got to be clear about our objectives as a business. We've got to now create the culture that we're bringing these people into. We know that we've got to open up the communication, etc. We've got to get the onboarding process right, etc. But what doesn't necessarily happen is that as people come in, they don't get communicated to what this is all about or what's actually happening. Can it fall through the gap sometimes there?
Yeah, definitely can. I mean, in the sense of, we touched on it earlier, you might have one colleague who's had a particular onboarding and induction experience, which is different from another colleague, right? And that's because you've got one manager who might be 20 years in the business and they know the business inside out. And then another manager who is 6 months in and they're only just getting to know the business, right? They're playing catch up on the whole mission, visions and value piece. And so for both of those, it's about giving them a structure to follow, ensuring that all of the knowledge, detail, experience that the 20-year manager's got, the same is true for the 6-month manager or even less than 6 months, but also all the process that the 6 months manager desires and needs, right, to have that structure for onboarding, that your 20-year manager is following the same, right? So ultimately, you get to a nice middle ground where everybody has the same experience. So, you know, you get into things like, so in terms of the in the onboarding piece, you get into things like, right, we've just gone to offer, they've accepted, right? Our process is we now need to make sure we've got a laptop hired, or, you know, we're leasing it. We've put in the lease request into the leasing company, and then it's, you know, got all the IT, and that's literally one of the first things that you're doing. Because sometimes, you know, you might have a candidate joining you within the next 2 weeks, having accepted the role, they might be immediately available. But it's about being really clear on what happens when and at what stages, and ensuring that your managers are following that experience, that process. Because ultimately, if they're not, as I mentioned, it can create risk for your business, which is not what you want.
But it's hard, that really hard. And one of the reasons it's really hard is because people want to use their tenure within a business, their experience within the business, etc., to protect their own position and say, well, I know things that other people don't know in this business because I've been here a long time. So I'm kind of not going to tell them that, or I don't want to disseminate that information to too many people, because, you know, what I know and what they don't know, that helps me. You know, that's human nature, isn't it? You are actually kind of going against quite a bit of human nature there in a way, for people to understand that actually what's going to make this team work best is actually if I let go of things that I know.
Yeah, and I think, like in that example, there's probably some work to do on the culture, right? So where you've got a manager that's holding on to things and not sharing information, knowledge, experience with other managers, there's definitely a culture piece going on there, right? Because ultimately what this should all be about is, right, we have an onboarding and induction program. At the end of it, we ask the people that have joined us what their experience was like. And some businesses might not do this, right? But it's a really good practice, actually. Is when you've taken a candidate through and you've, you know, got them perhaps successfully to the end of their probationary period, or even not, you're asking those colleagues what their experience was like. What did they like? You know, what would you like us to start doing as part of that induction and onboarding piece? What would you like us to stop doing? What would you like us to continue doing, right? And then sharing that intel, that information that you've got from a new candidate that's joined you. So for me, candidates that join businesses or candidates that are leaving businesses, that is the most important time where you can gain feedback from the individual or a group of individuals to help shift the dial on your employee experience, but also sharing that intelligence, that information with the whole management community and talking about it quite openly, you know, and being quite vulnerable, perhaps, you know. So it's your hire and the feedback is constructive. Actually being quite vulnerable, you know, I missed a step on the induction program or the onboarding program, and that's on me. You know, I'll make sure that we've got the relevant processes in place or people in place to make sure that doesn't happen again, right? But for me, it's fundamentally all of this comes down to communication. So communication from the candidate on what their experience has been like, and then using that intelligence to stoke a conversation within the management community on how can we use this information to almost create a marginal gain within our business on our experience, but doing it each and every time.
You're on mute.
I'm on mute. I'm going to ask everybody to go round and, without naming any names, obviously, because we don't want any legal ramifications, just to talk about possibly the worst onboarding experience they've ever heard of. I'm going to start during COVID, because I was still doing some workplace assessments, etc. I spoke to one lady who hadn't had any telephone call since starting the business from management after 8 weeks. So she 8 weeks into the role and had no communication whatsoever from management. just kind of been trying to get on best they could with stuff that had been passed over to them, but nothing. Anybody else?
Well, I was hired for a role, and on my first day, the person's role I was still work there, and I had to say I was there for something else while I learned that role. And obviously, I'd just resigned from a 22-year-old job, so couldn't really go back on what I'd done. So yeah, it wasn't very good.
My word.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard all sorts of stories in my time, right? In 20 odd years of working in HR. I mean, I think like one that stands out is, a senior manager within a business that's, parachuted into a business based on their skills and experience. And it's a new business for them, right? It's a new industry, it's a new sector. And they're presented to their peers as, ta-da, here's our new hire. And then they're given a list of names to that they need to be focused on and having conversations with, but they've no idea who those people are, what their jobs are, how they are important to them in their day-to-day. And then next minute, that manager's getting knocks on the door from all these individuals, right? I need your time on this. And the manager's who's just been brought into the business is like, I don't know where to start with all of this, right? So that's like an example of a bad induction experience at a managerial level. And I guess to flip that and talk about what good would look like, that's on that management levels manager to get really clear on these are the deliverables for your role. These are the important people that are important to your role. This is what they do. This is who they are. This is what they do. This is how to contact them. And this is why they're important to you. And then from there, you can actually create a structure on, right, okay, I've now got these deliverables. These are all the people. This is how to contact them. This is why they're important to me. And I can now start making a plan on engagement with each of those people. And I'm in control of that. So yeah, I thought I'd give the two sides to the experience. Not that I've had that personally. It's just, I've seen it happen elsewhere.
It'd be interesting to see when this goes out, if anyone else, has either any horror stories or actually resonates with one of those stories as well. I expect that's happened loads of times. Somebody runs into a business and literally meets the headlights of, these are all the people that you've got to manage. This, get on with it. Get on with what? I don't know what I'm getting on with.
Yeah, here's the team. Here's all the people that you need to speak to. Off you go. And then it's like, here's the person that we just hired them. We filled the role. Ta-da! Haven't we done a good job? And then the manager's literally like this.
Yeah. It's not like managing a football team, is it? Where at least you would be able to watch the form for, however long, seen the video, seen it on TV, get a feeling for what each of those players do. This is all behind closed walls.
To be fair, Graham, I was just about to say at McDonald's when we used to change stores, it depends on the type of store manager what was getting it. They'd either want a summary of all the managers and what they did and why they were important, or actually they would do what you've just said. They'd say, I don't want anything. And then they just watch the operation, they watch how the managers work, they'd watch themselves and they make their own decision. Because sometimes emotions can be within them decisions, and you have to go in and look at people from your own perspective of an ability. Does that make sense? And so I've probably, what Andrew just sort of said there, but I've seen it both sides, and it depends what works for you, because your decision on someone can be interpreted differently if somebody's put an impression on you because of that person. So
I think that's fair enough, isn't it?
I mean, you actually, for me, I think personally, less information's better, because you know you're better just having a hig chat with each of them people and saying, right, what you like about working here, what you do, tell me what jobs you do, tell me your responsibilities, what impact you have on the business, how can I help you achieve that, what do you need? And I think that makes people feel more valued. I know that you do need structure, I get that, but I also think you can inherit bad opinions on people when that's unfair sometimes, just because that person previously maybe didn't get on or whatever, because there's so many people that can work under different people because they're pushed in a different direction or they're heard differently or whatever, because they'll have had that ability to do that job. That's why they've got where they are. It's just a lack of motivation or...
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, you wouldn't want to, you wouldn't want to inherit a Messi and then find out that actually they keep the ball to themselves all the way and never pass it, would you? I mean, so you need to watch the gameplay and understand that a little bit.
Exactly.
But I think there's two important points that came out and were totally agreed on there, which is one, that you need time. As any new manager coming into a business, you need time, because if you're not given that time, either to be imparted with the knowledge or to observe and create your own knowledge about what's going on, then it isn't going to work. And even if you watch and observe for yourself and then make your own opinions, there will be opinions that pre-exist within the current management. And at some point you need time with the management to kind of bring your opinions and your viewpoint together with their perceived viewpoint on that, to see whether it actually correlates.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a review process.
Yeah, you're right. Because, you might have, you might almost have the kind of experience I talk to where, you've got a new managerial hire, their line managers giving a view on, right, these are the people that I think you need to speak to. These are the people, this is why I think they're important to you. And as a manager, you're getting into that, and actually you have a different view. You say, well, actually, these are the deliverables you've given me, and you've said this person's important to me in order to get that deliverable over the line. I actually don't think they are, and these are the reasons why. And it's having those open and having a culture to be able to have those open, challenging conversations is super important. And that, again, all lends itself into the employee experience piece, because, if you, as a new hire, don't feel able to constructively challenge, whether it be the chief exec or whether it be the managing director or whether it be, the person that's just joined the business in a sort of work experience role, it doesn't matter. You should feel free as a human. I mean, we do this in real life, right? Outside of work. If something happens in our family life, and something happens in, our leisure life or retail life or, hospitality life that we're experiencing, and we feel that we should challenge constructively, it's about creating that environment where people should feel able to challenge constructively at all levels within the organization.
It's been a great conversation today. Thank you both of you. Before we leave, one last point from both of you. What's one bit of advice you would give management in 2024 about getting this culture piece right?
Listen to the answers that the people are telling them, not the answers they may feel they want to hear. Actually listen and dig into the detail of what their staff want.
Ask the team, what do the team think the culture is within the organization? Let them give you their lens, and then bring that into your board meeting, senior leadership team meeting, and discuss that as a group in terms of whether you agree, disagree, what your alternative view might be, but hear the employee voice would be my key takeaway around culture.
Even if it's uncomfortable, which it might be.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
Probably more if it's uncomfortable, because then that means it needs to change. So that's probably actually you do. If you're quite open-minded and you listen to your staff, and you do that quite often anyway, you do viewpoint surveys or you ask opinions, you have a suggestion box and you bring the suggestions to life, and you allow your team to make decisions and you bring them to life, you've got the right culture anyway, haven't you? If you're a dictatorship in this day and age, especially with the new generation of people, they don't want to be dictated to. No. They want to feel included. They want to feel a part of the decision-making process. It's something as small as, would you like to be dressed on Friday every week or just once a month? And some people can say, oh, we don't get the same productivity out of people on Friday because they're in their own clothes. And you could talk about that all day, the pros and cons. And sometimes, yeah, you know, people's mindset can be a little bit different and thingy. However, it can also be your best day because people are happy and they're in a good mood, and so they work a little bit harder, a little bit faster, and you know, they might just get the work done better. They might actually maybe have a better conversation with the client because they're in a happier mood because they feel like them instead of feeling like they're putting the work Diane on, or do you know what I mean? And it just sometimes letting people's personality shine, that might actually be more of a benefit, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not entirely possible in all organisations, but I'd love to see more organisations get to a point where they're not doing appraisals. I mean, that might sound odd, but you know, it's almost archaic now when I hear people saying we do an appraisal once a year, right? I mean, for me, it should move from not doing an appraisal once a year to doing an appraisal on a regular basis and making that appraisal 360 to actually creating a culture of feedback.
Yeah.
And surely the best solution is a culture of feedback where actually everybody is asking for feedback all the time. Am I doing this well? Am I doing this? You know, is this working for you? You know, because once you get to that, managers, people at all levels, all asking each other, how am I doing? Is this working well? You know, can you tell me anything more in this? I want to grow. Then that's proper open culture. And there's a massive shift between one and the other. And we're still here on a day-to-day basis. People that go, well, we do an appraisal once a year. That's daft. That is so old-fashioned. It's unreal.
Yeah, there's definitely a shift. So just on that culture, you know, that feedback piece, one of the best books I've ever read around this whole thing is by an American author. He's called Patrick Lencioni, and he's written a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and it's principally built around, you know, I guess the Maslow's hierarchy of needs principle, but you know, it starts with being vulnerable, both the manager, employee, being vulnerable with each other. You know, what does vulnerability-based trust look like? You know, and then moving forward to having a healthy debate and so on and so forth. But you're right, there's definitely a shift to, I mean, I've seen it in other organizations, right, where they don't actually do annual appraisals anymore. And actually what they do now is it's much more of a career performance management focused conversation, right? So a two-way interaction with the colleague around, you know, what do you see your career looking like over the next, you know, 4 or 5 years? And that might be, I'm really happy with this role. I'm really happy, you know, I'm enjoying the work that I'm doing. I don't see myself, you know, progressing up the hierarchy or, you know, moving on to another organization. What I'd really like to do is get a lot more in-depth knowledge in this particular specialist area. That's a fantastic conversation to have versus another conversation that might be, yeah, I'm in this role, I'm really enjoying it, but I see myself in 3 years' time being the next CEO of the organization. And it's about, you know, finding ways through open two-way communication to facilitate whatever the individual's aspirations, career aspirations are. That's, you know, there's definitely a shift towards that kind of model. But also, you know, particularly in the SME space where I support organizations, a lot of the organizations still are focused on the annual appraisal piece. And a lot of my job is about reminding them that's not just like a one-shot deal where you just let people, you know, run through the year and, you know, perform or underperform. And then when they get to their annual appraisal, it's like, right, it's not been a good year for you. You know, that's not what it's about. It's about having regular conversations and guiding the colleague and, you know, the manager guiding themselves in terms of making sure that we're ultimately aiming for good, for an aspirational performance level at the end of the year, so that year end is more of a, almost like the icing on the cake. It's like, we've got these 12 conversations throughout the year, and this is just really summing those up.
Nicely segued the title of the podcast in.
No performance review should ever be a shock. There's nothing worse than you're trying to deliver a needs and performance review to someone who thinks they're an excellent. That shouldn't happen. If you're doing that, then there's something gone wrong in the process, isn't there?
Absolutely. And on that point, we shall let you go and review this. So please, if you've enjoyed it, do give us some stars. If you haven't, just give us 1 star. However you feel about it. Give us feedback one way or the other, because it's all constructive. Thank you for joining us again for another podcast from DCT Recruitment. Thank you to Andrew. Thank you to Diane. We'll be back again soon with more of this. Until then, bye for now.